Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
I'm Jessica Faust.
And today we are talking about our best tips for choosing an agent to query.
Yeah, so we have done a couple of videos on where to find the agents, but we do recommend that if you're at the very beginning stages, you can check out those videos. But some basic sites we recommend you look into are places like Query Tracker. From an outside perspective, and by outside I mean a non-querying person.
Right.
Query Tracker seems to me to be one of the most comprehensive resources for finding agents. There are message boards like Absolute Right. Obviously there's well, not obviously if you're new to this, but there's also a website called Manuscript Wishlist, which is a great place to start to get a feel for agents. I do have a caveat to Manuscript Wishlist, and that is really understanding what it is. And that Manuscript Wishlist is not the totality of what an agent represents. It's more like the mood an agent is in and what they're looking to add to their list or feel like their list is lacking.
Well, there's two manuscript wish lists. There's the one that feeds everything from Twitter, which I think is very much what you're saying. But there's also, I think that's MS wish list. And then there's manuscript wish list, which I think is, at least the way I used it, was a little more like, this is everything I'm looking for, where an agent will list everything, like their genres, their special interests, movies and TV shows they like. So I think that one's a little more complete, but then the MS wish list just feeds from Twitter, which, like you're saying, is kind of just our ramblings and musings on things we'd like to see. So
right. And then, of course, once you get those lists, an agency's website is probably your best source.
The best place to go.
But those are sort of comprehensive lists. I'm sure our readers have more that we've missed in the comments.
Yes, please drop them where you can.
Yep.
So apart from doing that actual research, we had a few qualifications on what might make an agent a good one for you to query for your project. And I think these are general enough that you can apply them to your...
Anyway,
I think these categories are general enough that you can apply them to your book and your particular writing. So let's just launch right into them.
Yeah, it's sort of a how to get started. And I think we tried to organize it a little bit in a start here and then break it down to here when you're querying.
Yeah, we started really general and then we helped you get a little more specific to the agent and your actual work.
But that being said, can I throw in something from the beginning rather than the end, I guess?
Yeah.
Which is, don't limit yourself. So there are certain aspects, and we'll mention this as we go, but you don't necessarily, in a research level, need to find the agent who, on paper and through your research, is looking for exactly your kind of book. And I think we have some problems sometimes where people look on manuscript wish lists and say, well, this agent never mentioned they're interested in the Civil War, so therefore I just won't send them my Civil War book. And just because we don't mention it doesn't mean we're not interested in it in some respects.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, at some point, like, are they open to your genre?
Yes.
Can you send them your query and let them decide? Like, there's a certain line where you might be crossing into the self-rejection zone, which we adamantly disagree with at all points. Yeah, so let's start with our list. The first one that we have is genre. This is probably the most obvious, but you want to look for agents who are working in your genre, working in your age group.
Right.
And that could be anything from picture book, middle grade, YA, adult, to the more like historical fiction and science fiction. You want to find someone who has an interest in that space and is actively accepting queries in those genres.
Correct. And all of these places we've mentioned, like Query Tracker, for example, I believe allow you to simply search by genre.
Yeah.
So if you're writing mystery, don't get overly specific and trying to find the genre for your book. If you're writing mystery, you're writing mystery. That's the place to start. Look for all those agents who represent mystery. Romance, picture books, whatever it is, find that big general genre description. Do that search first. And that'll get you the bigger chunk of agents and weed out those who just absolutely don't represent that.
Yeah, and that's why I think we chose this first, because it'll boil that giant list of agents everywhere down to agents that you can actively query. And then you start applying the rest of our little qualifications to that list. So the next one is the agency itself.
Right.
This is important. Who do they work with? What is known about their agency? What's their, I don't want to say reputation because that's our next one, but what's as a whole's reputation? What are they known for? What kind of books are they known for? Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting to know a little bit about the agency is helpful for you to get perspective. What you might also find is that the agency you're looking to query might have multiple agents there representing in your genre, which
True.
could be
Yeah.
helpful.
Right. So that kind of leads right into number 3, but I think this one we mean it a little more specifically for that agent, which is reputation. How is that agent known? What is their reputation?
Yeah, and I think this can actually go for the agent or the agency.
Yeah.
So if you find that a fairly new agent is somebody who fits your list but doesn't yet have a big reputation or a lot of sales, then you can look at the reputation of the agency. Because presumably in most cases, you know, an agency with a solid reputation is going to be working with agents who have or are developing good reputations.
Right.
Also, an agent who is new can garner a lot from the agents they're working with and the agency they're working with. So even though they haven't yet had the sales, they already have sort of the support behind them to get those sales.
Perfectly said, I think.
But also Query Tracker and Absolute Right are forums, which are great places to find out people's experiences with agencies and agents. Now, you do have to take some of it with a grain of salt. You know, if somebody's complaining, well, this person could never sell my book. Every agent and agency, of course, has a book or books or authors that they were never able to sell. What you're most concerned about is, are they paying their authors in time? Exactly. Are they submitting and making sales to reputable publishers? Are they treating their authors well? Those are the kinds of things we're talking about when we're talking reputation.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think something to remember too is those forums could very much be like places of just querying experiences too. Yes. Where somebody might have taken too long to respond or might have shown a level of interest and then ended up passing on things. So there could be that level of bad experiences that comes just from the process of querying. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt and know what to parse out and what to take as legitimate, I guess, or like good critique.
Well, it's kind of what we say to our authors when they start getting reviews.
Yeah.
You know, if you have 15 good reviews and one bad one, don't look at the bad one as the only person speaking. Clearly 15 other people disagree. Let's look at those 15 other people.
Agreed. So this kind of goes back to genre, our 4th point, but it's more specific in that looking at their interests, if they're available. Is there an agent who's interested in the Civil War, and is it worth you querying them because they're interested in the Civil War? I have a strange little thing for chickens, and if you have a chicken picture book, you might want to query me with it. But you love Alaska, and if I wrote a book set in Alaska and you have been open about this, I would want to come query you. So are they open about some sort of interest that kind of gives you that way in that people, yeah.
Yeah, so interest really align with manuscript wish list, which is otherwise known as hashtag MSWL. Most used on Twitter probably, but these are sort of personal interests within a genre that agents have. And I think you understand that maybe as a reader, where we all have those subjects, topics, whatever it is that grab our interest immediately as a reader, no matter what. Chickens, Alaska. There are just certain things that if you query me and that interest is a subject matter of the book, I am likely to take a closer look at it than I would maybe something else because it's something that I'm really actively looking to add or that I have a personal vested interest in or whatever it is. So that can help you. But what I would say is, well, it's good to know that, and you can definitely use that in your pitch. It's not essential to whether or not you query an agent. The agent represents your genre, but does not confess to having an interest in Alaska. You can still definitely query that agent. It's just that they have not mentioned that. They may actually have that interest. They may
Right.
just not have mentioned it.
This is just an added bonus.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, this is an important one, and I think that we'll have lots to say about it, but clients, knowing who that agent represents well, and how those clients are published and who they're published by and all of that fun stuff. So if you want to speak a little bit about that, because I'll just...
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's not just agent, it's agency.
Yeah.
Because
especially for us newer agents who don't have that level of client list or recognition. There you go.
Right. And also the idea that you might not know the clients, but that doesn't make them invaluable. I mean, yes. I think as agents, we get asked probably all the time, do you represent any authors we know? And I will name a long list of authors that they should know.
Right.
But they may have never heard of.
I love that you do that, though. I do love it.
It doesn't mean that those clients aren't successful. It just means that, you know, outside of what you read, especially for people who are more casual readers than many of us in the publishing industry, you know, they may not have heard of some pretty big names.
Right. They're plucking off the bestseller list that everybody in the world knows. But
right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So knowing the clients and getting a sense, and I also think a longevity helps. So if you're looking at an agent's client list and you see that they have been working with the same client or lists of clients for 10 or 15 years, it's a pretty good sign that the agent has some, you know, the clients are happy because they're not leaving, and the agent is working continuously with clients and building that career and building momentum. And I think that is sort of an indication of how the agent works, that there's somebody who's in it for the long haul. But of course, if they've had one book with a client and it seems that the client's rest of their books went elsewhere, that's not necessarily a bad thing, unless it seems to be consistent. I mean, authors do move around for a lot of reasons, and to be honest, it is, and very few of the reasons that authors move are because the agent was bad.
Right, but a bad fit, obviously, is probably the most predominant reason, and that doesn't necessarily equate to a bad agent.
No, I think sometimes what it comes down to is that the vision was different.
Yeah.
You know, the author maybe wanted to go in a different direction, the agent, and sometimes the agent shifts direction.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I talk a lot about how for years I represented romance. And I do have a few romance clients left on my list, but they are clients left on my list. I work just as hard with them as I work with everybody else, but I'm not usually taking on a lot of new romance clients right now.
Right.
So that's a shift that I've made. So looking at their client list, and it also gives you a sense of the type of books. You know, yes, you like
darker fiction or lighter fiction. Are they doing more nonfiction or fiction right now? Yeah, it's very indicative of what they're working on and sometimes what they're passionate about and what they do well.
Right. But it doesn't mean because they've represented darker books, they're only looking for darker books, which is something to consider too. But it does mean that they maybe have a tendency towards that.
Right, right. So our next point is knowing a bit about the agent's sales record or the agency's sales record.
Right.
Yeah, it could be really important. Okay. Knowing who they're selling to, whether those are publishers that you want to be published by, whether those are legitimate publishers and recognizable publishers, it goes a long way in helping you make a decision. So I think if an agent is selling to like smaller presses that you're not really wanting to be published by.
I would say only smaller presses.
Right, only smaller presses.
Because there are a couple agents in this business who have been around forever. And for me personally, they're some of the people I respect most as agents. And the one thing I've noticed when I look at their sales track record and their list is that they are certainly selling on a regular basis to Big Five, but they are also selling to smaller independents on a regular basis. And you know what that tells me is that they don't give up.
Right.
They aren't saying it only has to be a Big Five or I'm not going to bother. Right. What they're saying is when I find a book and I feel passionate about it, I'm not going to quit until I sell this book. You have a number of Big Five. I see that you are absolutely hitting and selling to those and have the connections there. But then you also have a good segment of smaller ones, which says to me, but you're not giving up. You're going to do whatever it takes to get this book published.
Yeah,
So
and
that
something
can
to
be some
remember.
important balance.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that that is important. And I think that's something that every writer should consider too, because just because you're at a big five doesn't mean you're at a successful publishing partnership. I think that
Right.
we can't write off smaller and medium-sized publishers for being good at what they do and for putting out good books and with good marketing and all of that. So I think it, like you said, it shows like a healthy, shows that they're pitching to a healthy marketplace and a full marketplace, and it shows that they don't give up, but also that they're willing to find the best home for their client, even if that best home doesn't manage to be Penguin Random House's top imprint, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Yeah.
think that that's something that you want to look for in an agent, even if it's not, you know, like the top notch of your dreams, but it's still something to consider.
Yeah, well, and also a lot of the authors that you know today in fiction and nonfiction started somewhere smaller and built a
Right.
career from there. And some of them remain there. I mean, some of, you know, the most popular, biggest selling books, especially in nonfiction, are not with big five publishers. The important thing is they have sales.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and Publishers Marketplace is a good place to start that research. The one thing to note is not all sales are reported. So also checking out the agency's website to see what kind of sales they're getting there
Yes. And
is
also,
definitely helpful.
there's a delay too from the time we close a deal to when we can announce it, especially in picture books. But knowing that it might not be the most up to date, but no, it's true. That's probably the best place to start, because
Well, and
it's
sometimes there's a strategy to announcing
right.
belatedly, and that involves getting things like foreign sales and the like wrapped up, or not wanting to reveal
Yeah.
the idea that you've sold until the book is super close to publication and selling to bookstores. So there's sometimes a strategy to that delay that makes it seem like the person or the agency might not have sales, but in truth, they've had plenty. You just don't know about them yet.
So our last point is personal connection. And I think this is another one that we have to preface with take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily think there always has to be a personal connection. And I think that's putting more work for the author. But
well, and we're sort of talking before you really have a chance to talk to the agent
right.
necessarily. So, you know, when you have a phone call with the agent, when an offer of representation right. comes in, personal connection is more important and right. also different. But when you're starting out querying, and where you're getting your information about agents are YouTube and Twitter, and maybe if you're lucky at a writer's conference, it's a little bit different because there's a distance there that obviously we all know social media provides.
Right. And I think it's making more work for an author who already has a ton of work when querying to force a connection. Like the advice that find a connection and start with that. Not everybody has that. So now what we're asking authors to do is, and sometimes to an extent that they don't know when to stop, is to creep our social medias and try and find this connection that they have to force. And I just don't think that's a good use of their time, or I don't think it really brings anything about an agent to mind that makes like I have to work with them, if that makes sense. Like I just
I think it makes perfect sense. And the other thing to consider is we all have social media personas.
Right.
You know, and there are certain things we'll post on Twitter, Instagram, that is certainly a bit representative of who we are, but it's not representative of the whole of us.
Right.
So if there's a huge red flag that somebody posts and you're like, then definitely feel free not to query them. But don't expect that every person you're going to query, you're going to be like, I know we're going to be best friends.
Right. And I mean, I think some of the agents at BookEnds who just don't use Twitter that much, and
right.
that's your main place that you're looking for outside of like website bios, that you're looking for that connection. Sometimes I just think there is not that personal connection that's immediately apparent. It's fine to say, hey, like I think you would like this, and that's why I'm querying you. I think that's fine.
I think that's reason enough to query, because what you want to do when you're querying is really get as many out there as you can.
Right.
When the offer of representation comes in, that's the time when you can really explore whether there's a connection between you and the agent. But I think worrying about it at the querying stage, like you said, is just causing unnecessary work for an author, when really you just got to get your query and your book out there.
Right. And just to stress that when you do get your offer of representation, that's your time to weed down to the people that you really want to work with.
Yep.
So
and there's plenty of videos on that.
But yeah, so those are our top 7 tips. It's an odd number, but there it is, of how to pick an agent to query. We hope they were helpful. If you have any other little tips and tricks for your fellow writers, don't forget to put them in the comments. I'm sure we would love to hear them, and anybody watching would love to read them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we hope to see you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks.